introduce a book to you. You know, people always want to hear what the name of the books are. The last time I was reading from books, not books. When we was talking about Spain and Columbus, we were reading from different excerpts from different books. Well, this book that we have in right now named The World's Worst Atrocities, it lies on the cover of the book. Yes, The World's Worst Atrocities. And what is concerning us tonight, Black History Month, is King Leopold and the Congo. And them have a picture of King Leopold in here. I never see a picture of King Leopold yet. May I tell you, the man look a weird rasta. You know, him look like Hitler. Not Hitler, sorry. He look like Castro. Yes, Leopold, King Leopold II of Belgium. He look like Castro, rasta. Yeah. See him white up beard and all them things there. Okay. We're going to read some things that will startle you, baffle you, and worry you. So, if you have weak heart, they could just go and play the music, but we have to give you this history. King Leopold of the Belgium. And we're also going to read back a letter. A couple months ago, we read a letter that King Leopold gave the missionaries when they were going into the Congo. We're going to read back that letter again, and then we're going to read a history, a synopsis of one of the world's worst atrocities, taken from a book called The World's Worst Atrocities. So, serious thing. Start with Black History School, Black History lesson tonight here on the cutting edge. Yes, we feel good to know that the cutting edge just slam bam right into February the 1st. So we really present this to you. Okay, we're reading from a book named The World's Worst Atrocities, and put Hitler on the front of it. Okay. All right, well, we want, what is concerning is not Hitler right now, is King Leopold and the Congo and the Middle Passage. So if we don't finish before the program done, maybe next week we'll go into it, but next week we want to present Belgium. You know, Belgium is a country in Europe, and Belgium is a very small country compared to the other countries in Europe. So you must understand what is taking place here. Belgium was only established as a nation in 1831. 1831, Belgium was established as a nation. So it was a late starter in the imperialist race. Nevertheless, its second king, Leopold II, was an ambitious man. Like the rest of Europe, he turned his eyes to Africa. He paid Henry Martin Stanley, the rescuer of Dr. Livingstone. For those of you who don't know who was Dr. Livingstone, Dr. Livingstone went into Africa. I think he reached into Tanzania also. Okay, these are the Europeans who invaded our land in this time. Belgium was only established in 1831, and the second king was an ambitious man like the rest of Europe. He turned his eyes to Africa. He paid Henry Martin Stanley, the rescuer of David Livingstone, to explore the Congo, which led to the establishment of the Congo Free State under the sovereignty of Leopold in 1885. History lesson you're getting tonight. However, reports of the atrocities committed in Leopold's names, they appalled. Come again. Reports of the atrocities committed in Leopold's name there appalled the world and forced him to hand over the Congo in 1908. The Congo was rich in ivory, but even richer in black ivory. Slaves. Although the British had outlawed slavery in 1833 and put the Royal Navy in the Atlantic to stop the Western trade, trade to the east still flourished. Indeed, slavery was only outlawed in the Arabian Peninsula in 1970. Although Leopold publicly issued great anti-slavery edicts, he was playing a double game. Listen to these fark-tongue people, you know. Listen to these fark-tongue. This is serious history here. Although Leopold publicly issued great anti-slavery edicts, he was playing a double game. It's like the Pope who come out against homosexuality, playing a double game. He made Tipotip, a slave trader from Zanzibar, governor of the Congo Eastern Province. At the same time, he also brought the freedom of several thousands of Tipotip slaves and press gang them into the force publique, the Congo's militia, where they remained essentially slaves. They were then used to enslave the rest of the population. We have an eyewitness account of what it was like to be taken into slavery by Leopold's men. Listen to these stories. It comes from a woman named Langa and was recorded by an American who published it at the turn of the century. Langa told him, quote, "Our village is called Wanyendo, after our chief, Niendo. It is a large village near a small stream, and it is surrounded by large fields of cassava, maize, and other foods. We all worked hard in the fields, and we always had plenty to eat. We never had war in our country, and the men did not have many weapons except knives." You hear that? The woman, this is an eyewitness account given here now. They said there was no wars in the Congo, and the men did not have many weapons except knives. You know what they use the knives to do? To hunt. We were all busy in the fields, owing as it was the rainy season, when the weeds sprang up quickly, when a runner came to the village saying that a large band of men were coming. They all wore red caps and blue clothes and carried guns and long knives. Many white men were with them, and their chief was Kibalanga. This was the African name for the force publique officer, Oscar Michuk, who had been decorated personally by King Leopold. Niendo called the elders to his house while drums were beaten to summon the people back to the village. They discussed the matter for a long time. Eventually, it was decided that the people should go back to the fields and bring groundnuts, plantains, and cassava for the soldiers who were coming, and goats and chickens. The women went out with baskets, filled them, and put them by the road. Niendo thought that by giving the visitors a lot of food, they might pass by without harming his people. And so it proved to be, said Langa. When the white men and their warriors had gone, we went again to our work and were hoping they would not return. But a short time later they did. As before, we brought them great heaps of food. But this time, Kibalanga did not move away immediately. He camped near our village, and his soldiers came and stole our fowls and goats and tore up our cassava, but we did not mind that, as long as they did not harm us. Next morning, soon after the sun rose over the hill, a large band of soldiers came to the village, and we all went into the houses and sat down. We were not seated long when the soldiers came rushing and shouting and threatening Niendo with their guns. They ran into the houses and dragged the people out. 3 or 4 came to our house and caught hold of me, my husband Olika and my sister Katinga. We were all crying, for we knew that we were to be taken away as slaves. The soldiers beat us with the iron sticks from their guns and forced us to march to the camp of Kabilanga. He ordered the women to be tied up, 10 to each cord. The men were tied up the same way, separately. When we were all collected, there were many from other villages we did not know, and many from Waningo. The soldiers brought baskets of food for us to carry, some of which contained smoked human flesh. The soldiers brought baskets of food for us to carry, some of which contained smoked human flesh. We then set off marching very quickly. My sister Katinga had her baby in her arms and was not forced to carry a basket, but my husband Olika was made to carry a goat. He marched until the afternoon. When we camped near a stream, we were glad to be able to have a drink there because we were very thirsty, but the soldiers gave us nothing to eat. The next day we continued the march, and when we camped at noon, we were given some maize and plantains, which had been taken from near a deserted village. The people had run away. It continued like this for 5 days. Then the soldiers took my sister's baby and threw it on the grass, leaving it to die, and made her carry some cooking pots that they had found in the deserted village. On the 6th day, we became very weak from lack of food and from constant marching and from sleeping on damp grass. My husband, who marched behind with a goat, could not stand up any longer, so he sat down beside the path and refused to walk anymore. The soldiers beat him, but still he refused to move. Then one of them struck him on the head with the butt of his rifle, and he sprawled on the ground. One of the soldiers caught the goat, while 2 or 3 others stuck the long knives they put on the end of their guns into my husband. I guess you're talking about the bayonets. The bayonets and the guns. I saw blood spurt out and then saw him no more. We had passed over the brow of a hill and he was out of sight. Many of the young men were killed in the same way. After marching for 10 days, we came to the great water and were taken in canoes across town at Nyangwe. Now we must say here, that you have some men, some black people who in cohort with all these things, Just like now, you have some black man, when you start telling them about all certain things, if you uplift them and advance them, them look at you and say, oh, you're idiot, you don't know what you're talking about. Them prefer the European way of living, what I mean? The cheap clothes, the Tamil figure, and the Nike shoes, and the made in Germany and made in Italy kind of clothes. Them is in cohorts with the invaders, still up to this day. Just like the Maroons. When the Maroons, it was in cohort with the British. To capture Taki, Nani, Sam Sharp, and all of these great warriors that stand up for it. So it was, and so it still is. Later, Leopold ordered that the children should be separated from their parents and organized into 3 children colonies, where they would be taught Christianity and be trained as soldiers. So it's what I'm doing here now. Leopold ordered that the children, should be separated from their parents and organized into 3 children colonies, where they would be taught Christianity and be trained as soldiers. But the missionaries and the colonies said that they should only take orphans. The Force Publique took this as an excuse to butcher their parents, then force march the children to the colonies. Thousands perished of a column of 108 boys on a forced march to a state colony at Boma in 1892. Only 62 made it to their destination, and 8 of them died in the next few weeks. The colonies, come again. All right, them say only 62 made it out of the 108 boys to their destination, and 8 of them died in the next few weeks. The colonialists themselves were rife with disease, and their mortality rate was 50%. Still, some survived to make soldiers. In 1839, American inventor Charles Goodyear accidentally spilled sulfur onto some hot rubber on his stove. The result was a substance that did not turn stiff when it was cold or go gooey and smelly when it was hot, both of which had been major problems for the manufacture of rubber boots and coats. Then, in 1885, John Dunlop fitted a pneumatic tire to his son's tricycle wheel. His new company set off the craze for bicycles, and he had developed the tire just in time for the coming of the automobile. Rubber was not just needed for car tires, but also tubing, hoses, and gaskets. And the new telegram, telephone, and electrical companies needed rubber for insulation. In the 1890s, therefore, there was a rubber boom, and the Congo was full of wild rubber, which came from vines rather than trees. However, it would need vast manpower to harvest it. Serious thing now. So you see now, see what is happening here now? Charles Goodyear accidentally spilled sulfur and some hot rubber on his stove. The result was a substance that did turn stiff. Did not turn stiff when it was cold. And then the next guy now, where you have Dunlop tire. In 1885, John Dunlop fitted a tire to his son's tricycle wheel. His new company set out to create a bicycle and had developed the tire just in time for the coming of the automobile. And what was needed here was rubber. Rubber. The wealth of Africa is so vast that the Western world has plagued and has vampirized Africa so much that everything that helped to make the wheels of Europe spin, they went into Africa to find what they needed. Everything that made the wheel of Europe spin was found in Africa. And we as black people had to pay that price for the development of Europe, where we had no say, we had no representation, and we had no, what you call, nothing to even survive in a world that see us, black people, as just things rather than beings. That is why in America they say we were 2/5 of a human being. We couldn't vote because we wasn't a full human being. Imagine that. Imagine that. Black people, you are recognized as 2/5 of a person, and in the Congo, you were only seen as men and women who was needed to get rubber to make the wheels of Europe run. The wheels of Europe wanted rubber. Collecting the rubber from vines was an hideous business. Laborers would have to stay in the flooding forest for days on end. The sap from the vines had to be coagulated. This was done by spreading it on the arms and chest until it hardened. When it was ripped off, listen to these things in original history. We read it from a book named The World's Worst Atrocities. Every time we read from a book, we get calls from email from America, Europe, to ask which book we are read. Well, listen to these things now, listen to this. The sap from the vines had to be coagulated. This was done by spreading it on the arms and chest until it hardened. No, you see when that hardened on your chest, and you have to take that off. My God. You see when that hardened on your chest, and you have to take it off. You know, say, all your flesh. You ever chewing gum ever stick by your skin yet? And you try to take it all by your foot, your ear there. Well, listen to me, man. When that hardened on your chest, you hear the man say, when it was ripped off, it took the body ear with it. Needless to say, this was painful. No amount of trinkets could induce the Africans to do it. No amount of trinkets you could give these Africans could induce them to do it. What is more, as the job had to be done out in the jungle, one could not simply shackle a bunch of men and set them to work under an overseer. That was people. You couldn't just shackle the man then because it's out in the jungle, it had to be done. So you have to have man hand free and man foot free to do this work. And that was a problem because, you know, them don't know them jungle, they like the African them, so you know, say, they run away. Anyway, more brutal methods had to be adopted. So it's why people have to find a more brutal method now. The British Vice Consul in 1899 explained, quote, this is now an army like the police force that them set up in a Jamaica now for oppress black people now. It named the Force Publique, would arrive in channels at a village, the inhabitants of which invariably bolted on their arrival. The soldiers were then landed and commenced looting, taking all the chickens, grains, etc., out of the houses. After this, they attacked the natives until able to seize their women. These women were kept as hostages until the chief of the district bought the required number of kilograms of rubber. The rubber having been brought, the women were sold back to their owner for a couple of goats apiece, and so they continued from village to village. The wife of any man refusing to collect rubber would be killed. She might die anyway, as the conditions were harsh and food scarce in the stockades where they were held. The soldiers guarded the women. The soldiers guarding the women would take the prettiest and rape them. Although acid shaking was not publicly announced in Brussels, this method of collecting rubber is recommended by the official manuals handed out in Africa. Once the system got going, every village was assigned a quota. This was usually 3 to 4 kilos of dried rubber per adult male per fortnight, which essentially meant full-time work for the men. Not only was this barbaric, it was self-defeating. Instead of tapping the vine so that it continued to live, the collectors tore down the vine in the stubble to make the quotas. You see, destroy now the environment now. Hundreds of thousands of men were conscripted in this way. They were overseen by the force publique, it's like the police force, who built garrisons throughout the rubber-growing areas. Men had to carry their heavy load of rubber for miles to deliver it to the company agents. They would get paid in chiclets or a few spoonfuls of salt. One chief was paid in people. He was told he could eat them, kill them, or use them as slaves, anything he liked. I tell you. When a village resisted, the force publique would be employed to terrorize them, just like the police force now. 10 hostages would be taken, tied up in the tent with big stones and pushed in the river. The women would then be raped. Sometimes the force publique would simply shoot everyone in order to intimidate other villages. However, the force publique were strict with their ammunition. They did not want their troops to go wasting it on hunting or shooting for recreation. So for every bullet they were issued, the soldiers would have to return one right hand. Hear that? For every soldier, for every bullet that was issued, to give account for that bullet, you need to carry back the right hand of someone. Sometime when a man did a little hunting and shot an animal, he would cut off the hand of a living man. I tell you, you hear that? I said, oh, you know, a man that does kill an animal, you know. But through him bullet, no have to give account for him bullet. He just chop off a man hand, a living man hand, and just carry the hand. And we have pictures. We have pictures of the Congo with men holding them own wrists. Men hold black people holding them own wrists. This is the devastation that the Belgians placed on Africa during the 18th. In 1894, one Belgian officer, Leon Fevez, explained what he did when the local villages failed to supply his troops with what he demanded. Now, this is a Belgian officer in 1894 explaining what he did. One example was enough. 100 heads cut off, and there have been plenty of supplies around the station ever since. So, in just simple, you know. In just simple. To just alleviate his problem. Him just catch 100 Africans and cut off them head. Everybody know that now, they must get busy. Keep them money around. Everybody around with black people life in the rasta. 100 heads cut off. And there have been plenty of supplies around the station ever since, he said. My goal is ultimately humanitarian. I killed 100 people, but allowed 500 others to live. I tell you. You hear what the man say? This is a Belgian officer, Leon Fevez. He said, in order to get the supplies happening, all him do was cut off 100 man head. And him say, he is a humanitarian. He is a humanitarian. He say, this is coming from his own mouth. I killed 100 people, but allowed 500 others to live. Leopold was ambitious for the Congo. He wanted to open the country up and planned to build a railway. Of the 540 Chinese construction workers brought in from Hong Kong in 1892, 300 died on the job or ran away into the forest. Several hundred workers came in from Barbados, thinking they were being taken somewhere else. When they realized they were in the Congo, you hear that? This is coming from Barbados, you know. They take several hundred men from Barbados to work in the Congo under false pretense. Just like when Jamaicans used to leave Jamaica and go to England on the banana boat, them feeling that the streets of England were paved with gold, only to find the cold and Queen Elizabeth and her ears is a serious thing. Thinking they were being taken somewhere else. When they realized they were in the Congo, they rioted, at which point the soldiers opened fire on them. The survivors were taken to the railroad and put to work. Tropical diseases, lack of food, no shelter, relentless floggings, engines that ran off the track, and boxcars full of dynamite that exploded cost the lives of nearly 2,000 men in the 80-year construction of the first stretch of railroad track. Missionaries who had seen Africans slaughtered and piles of severed hands began publishing articles in the European papers. Leopold asked the heads of the missionary societies to come and talk to him instead, as dealing with the press was, however, the missionaries persisted. In 1897, a Swedish Baptist missionary told a meeting in London that forced public soldiers were actually rewarded for the number of hands they brought in. Some said they were paid money. Other soldiers told him, the commissioner had promised us if we had plenty of hands, he will shorten our service. I have brought in plenty of hands already, and I expect my time of service will soon be finished. Now, this was something that was big in the Congo, you know. Yes, chopping off hands during Leopold time. Them chop off your hand and carry it in. You know, like how the white people, them used to scalp the Indians. Yes, white people used to scalp Indians. We were taught in school and in movies in Hollywood that is the Indians used to, you know why the Indians used to scalp the pilgrims, the white people them? Because there was a thing that the more scalp, you just like this, the more hands you carry back. The more hands you carry back is the more you're standing as a soldier. You're liable to get off. The more scalp you carry back to the fort, the more you're in standing to get off as a soldier. And the Indians them start to return the scalping, scalp to scalp. Don't make them tell you no foolishness. It's not the Native Americans start the scalping in America. It's the cowboy and the cavalry start scalping the Native Americans, and the Native Americans start to scalp them back. This is an example of scalping your hand. You cut off your hand and carry it there. So, as a black man now, if you want to get big recommendation, you just go for your next black man and just cut off your man and carry it, go through the high ranking man and say, yes, good boy. Sound familiar, eh? Yes. The British press was already gunning for Leopold in 1895. A Belgian officer had dared to kill an Englishman. Actually, the victim was an Irishman who had gone native and married an African woman. His ivory business challenged Leopold's monopoly, so the force public was sent in. They hanged Britain, and the London press howled in outrage. Leopold countered the bad press he was getting by creating a commission for the protection of the natives. Okay, comprising 6 Belgian Catholics and 6 foreign missionaries. And we're going to read the letter that Leopold gave the missionaries during their time of occupation there. So we're going to read a letter after we're done read this little paragraph here. It said, Leopold countered the bad press he was getting by creating a commission for the protection of the natives, comprising 6 Belgian Catholics and 6 foreign missionaries. It was a public relation coup, universally greeted as a good thing. Leopold had cleverly picked commissioners who lived so far apart that the commission only met twice, and then only 3 members attended. The World's Fair took place in Brussels in 1897. The Belgian exhibit included 267 Africans brought from the Congo. They were depicted as living happily in an African village set up for them in a park in Brussels. Just to make sure they were happy, 90 of them were members of the Force Publique. At a gala dinner, a black sergeant proposed a toast to King Leopold. Now I tell you, man, as the vines died, the Africans found it increasingly difficult to fulfill their quotas, which in any case were always being raised. The Bunja tribe rebelled, killing 30 soldiers, then fled. A punitive expedition was sent against them, led by an American robber agent named Edgar Canisius. As our party moved, this is Edgar Canisius talking, as our party moved through village after village, a party of men had been detained with torches to fire every hut, he wrote. As we progressed, a line of smoke hung over the jungle for many miles, announcing to the natives far and wide that civilization was dawning. May I tell you, so the man them burned down the village, them say civilization is dawning. Under Canisius' command were 50 soldiers and 30 porters carrying their supplies. Quote again, we marched through native clearings where the trunks of large trees lay by hundreds across our path, he said. Over these we had to climb. The trail seemed to lead to the top of every high ant hill within range. The porters had an especially hard time, for many of them were chained together by the neck. They carried out boxes slung on poles, and when one fell down, he usually brought down all his companies on the same chain. So them tie these black people by the neck, and if one get tired and drop, everybody come down, drop too. And it's near to, you know, if you see the picture of them, or them tie them, there's no way a man can move and the other everywhere are moving, okay? It's like a domino effect. You get tired and you drop, everybody have to drop with you. It's a serious thing. The porters had an especially hard time, for many of them were chained together by the neck. They carried out boxes slung on boxes. This is where you see like in a Tarzan movie, you know. You usually see them thing in a Tarzan movie with the African, them carry the whole of a box them in a jungle. When one fell down, he usually brought down all his companies on the same chain. Many of the poor wretches became so exhausted by the kind of marching that they could be argued, that they could be urged forward only by blows from the butt ends of the rifle, held to carry heavy loads, each of which had previously required 2 men to transport, until they finally succumbed to starvation and smallpox. This process took too long, though, and as the fighting grew worse, Canisius' men began shooting their prisoners, 30 at a time. Summing up the campaign, Canisius said, we had undergone 6 weeks of painful marching and had killed over 900 native men, women, and children. And why? For the prospect of adding fully 20 tons of rubber to the monthly crop. This is the man talking now. This is history. This is quotations. This man named Canisius, a rubber merchant, him say, summing up the thing, him say, we had undergone 6 weeks of painful marching and had killed over 900 native men, women, and children. And why? For the prospect of adding fully 20 tons of rubber to the monthly quota. This is the cutting edge on RFM. A book where highlights the world's worst atrocities. It have the Mongoloids. It have the destruction of the Aztecs. It's white people that again, you know. I tell you, they have the Middle Passage. You know, so most of these atrocities is white people do them. Yes. And this is not being weird now, but it's truth. This is the truth now. When you look at the contents of the book, and it's talking about the world's worst atrocity, most of these atrocities was perpetrated by white people. What a terrible thing. What a terrible thing. And then put down the bottom name, Rwanda Art of Darkness. And then put Sharpeville Massacre. Then put the liquidation of the Warsaw Ghetto. The death of the Romanovs, King Leopold and the Congo, Wounded Knee, Reign of Terror, the Middle Passage, the destruction of the Aztecs. All of these things is written in this book. So we'll continue with Leopold and the Congo. We talk about the virgin named Canisius and until 900 native people. 900 natives just to get 20 tons of rubber as his monthly quota. Roger Classman, the Irish nationalist, later executed for treason, was at that same time working for the Foreign Office. He was sent to the Congo as consul and reported back on the brutalities he had witnessed. He discovered that soldiers did not just cut off the hands of their victims when accused of killing only women. They castrated their victims to prove otherwise. Castrated their victims. No. As we talk about castration, we know this is a thing that people don't know, and people might wonder about these things. But the idea of lynching, we all know about lynching. Lynching is what used to take place in the south of America. We hear about the lynching of black people. Up to this day, them are lynch black people. Physical lynching. Them look for a tree, throw a rope around it, and publicly lynch a black man. But you know, you're the part of the lynching where them don't tell you about now, which is true. Most of these black men who were lynched, when they were found without their testicles, their private parts, their penis. They were found without their penis. Because these men who used to carry out these lynching, they used to cut off the penis of the black man. And as a matter of fact, not just cutting off the penis of the black man was enough, but exhibiting the penis of the black man was part of their little game too. Because we are told and we have read of witnesses, we have pictures to show, not drawing. We're not talking about drawing like Jesus drawing no and Last Supper drawing. We're talking about camera photo. Pictures show you black men being roasted and hundreds of white people stand up around him, examining and enjoying this thing. As a matter of fact, they used to have posters. The posters was now like a dance poster. Dance poster now. Proclaiming now the burning of a nigger. Burn, nigger, burn. Them used to have events where them chucking people, chucking children, cameraman, all sorts of people. Them used to hang these niggers. And when the niggers were hanged, them used to cut them and sell the parts for a souvenir. It sounds gross, don't it? It sounds gross, but it's true. It's not me writing this history. These things is documented. So, the idea of cutting off the black man penis is a serious sexual inferiority complex that lies in the Caucasian people. And there's a woman by the name of Chris Welsing, a psychologist, who shows you the idea of the penis, the big ball versus the little ball. And in this theory, she shows where the big ball games is controlled by black men, and the little ball games is controlled by white people. And the obsession of sex, what they call sexual inferiority complex, is so much in European people that everything that they make as destruction resembles a penis. The white male is like him have an inferiority sexual complex where every destructive weapon him use is representing the penis. Bullet, the shape of the bullet. Look on the shape of the bullet is designed like a penis. If you look at a rocket, the shape of a rocket is shaped like a penis. This is not just happening because of any scientific explanation. This is a psychological thing, which is also a scientific explanation. And she's showing that in the game of pool and billiard, she's saying that if you notice how the game is designed and structured, where the last ball to sink must be the white ball, and you must sink the white ball. If you sink the white ball, you lose. But the colored balls are the first to sink, and the black ball is the next one, because the black ball and the white ball are always about the game. She said, in her thesis, she's saying that this is a very racist game that has been perpetuated through the inadequate sexual complex of Caucasian people. That everything of destruction, they shape it like a penis. And even the language they use is in line with this thing. So the cutting off of the penis of the black man when lynched was very, very popular amongst these people. And when they used to kill these black people, they cut out them flesh and carry on the flesh as souvenir. And we read, 2 weeks ago we read where Columbus men came to the Caribbean here and set up shops. And they used to sell the flesh of the natives, what them call Arawaks and Caribs. They used to sell the flesh in the market to feed them dog. They used to sell the flesh of these black Arawaks to feed the dog. And in feeding the dog with these flesh, it was easier for the dog to hunt Arawaks. Imagine that. This is the atrocities that these people place on us, you know. And this is historical. This is very historical. So, we continue the reading. The situation looked... Alright, we could go back here. Casement reports provoke a debate in Parliament. We could still go up more. Roger Casement, the Irish nationalist later executed for treason, was at that time working for the Foreign Office. He was sent to the Congo as consul and reported back on the brutalities he had witnessed. He discovered that soldiers did not just cut off the hands of their victims when they accused of killing only women. They castrated their victims to prove otherwise. Casement's reports provoked a debate in Parliament, but when this did not move the matter on as he had hoped, Casement went public. Newspapers across Europe began reporting the atrocities in the Congo. Stories emerged of mass murder, where entire villages and towns had been wiped out, brutal beatings, mutilations, rapes, mass starvation, and epidemics of smallpox and other diseases the whites had brought in all. 10 million people died as a result of Leopold's reign. Listen to these stories and listen and learn. We're not just scared. Don't get scared and don't get afraid. Don't get scared and don't get afraid. These are things that must be told. Mass starvation, epidemics, smallpox and other diseases the whites had brought in all. 10 million people died as a result of Leopold's reign. The situation looked so dire that showed trails of particular brutal Belgian robber agents were staged in the Congo. Their defense was that the natives were lazy. That sounds familiar. Yeah, no matter that about black people lazy. Black people build the Western world, physically build it. Jamaica is black people, blood, sweat and tears build this place here. And when now, them a come tell we know so we lazy. After we sometimes we want to work. Black people want to work and can't get no work because the infrastructure is not there to make black people work on a certain level. And when you can't get no work, them say, oh no, too lazy. Same thing. Same thing. The situation looks so dire that shows trail of particular brutal Belgian robber agents were staged in the Congo. Their defense was that the natives were lazy. How else, without their terror tactics, were they to be made to work? Most were acquitted. Those found guilty escaped with light sentences. You see, in all of that? In all of that. The king of the Belgians seemed to be rising out the storm. Now, I want you to know, say, most Tarzan movies, most of the Tarzan movies that we see is what you call now centered in the Congo. Yeah. Most Tarzan movies that you see is centered in the Congo. The king of the Belgians seemed to be riding out the storm until the 65-year-old King Leopold took up with a 16-year-old prostitute. I tell you. Boy, I tell you the Rasta. I tell you. Anyway, I could go and read it, because if you say certain things, that's no. I'm going to cut it out of slack off of the ear. All right. The King Leopold, at 65-year-old, took up with a 16-year-old prostitute. Now, one of the people that knows that this book is not a black book, you know. So I don't want to accuse you, I don't know, you know. This book is not a black book. This is an ordinary book written. It's not no black book, this. This is history book here, talking about certain things. Okay. The 65-year-old Leopold took up with a 16-year-old prostitute. She was the love of his life, but she cost him the love of his people and made him a ridiculous figure in the eyes of the world, especially when he took her with him to Queen Victoria's funeral in 1901. Social reformer Edmund Morel set up the Congo Reform Association with branches throughout the United Kingdom. Even Sunday members would be regaled with reports of atrocities received from eyewitnesses. This one came from a missionary, the Reverend John Harris. Quote, lined up were 40. I tell you, all right, you can read it. Lined up with 40 emaciated sons of an African village, each carrying his little basket of rubber. The toll of rubber is weighed and accepted, but 4 baskets were short at the demand. The order is brutally short and sharp. Quickly, the first defaulter is seized by 4 lusty executioners, thrown on the bare ground, pinned hands and feet, that means them kneel him down, whilst a 5th steps toward carrying a long whip of twisted hippo hide. Swiftly and with precision, the whip falls, and the sharp corrugated edges cut deep into the flesh, on back, shoulders, and buttocks. Blood spurts from a dozen places. In vain the victim twists in the grip of the executioner, and then the whip cuts other parts of his quivering body. And in the case of one of the 4, upon the most sensitive parts of the human frame, the 100 lashes each left 4 mert bodies bloody and quivering on the shimmering sand of the rubber collecting point. This is a quote from a man who's eyewitnessing these things. Following hard upon this decisive incident was another. Breakfast was just finished when an African father rushed up to the veranda steps of our mud house and laid upon the ground an hand and foot of his little daughter, whose age could not have been made more than 5 years. Morrill took his campaign to the U.S., where Leopold paid lobbies in Washington to defend his case. But when one was discovered trying to bribe members of the Congress, Atrocities in the Congo began to make the front pages. To try and stem the tide of criticism, Leopold set up a new commission of inquiry with 3 judges, 1 Belgian, 1 Swiss, and 1 Italian. Again, he picked shrewdly. The judges knew no African language, nor did they speak enough English to talk to the highly critical British and American missionaries who were leading the international campaign. Moreover, the Italian Baron Giacomo Nisco had been chief judge in the Congo. He was convinced of the need for stern discipline and had let out Belgian officers found guilty of atrocities with light sentences. Nevertheless, the evidence collected was so overwhelming it could not be ignored. They collected 370 dispositions, one from Chief Lontulo of Bolima, who had been flogged, held hostage, and set to work in chains. He laid on the table of the commission 110 twigs, one for each of his tribe who had been murdered in the quest for rubber. He divided the twigs into 4 piles, one for tribal nobles, one for men, one for women, and one for children. Then he put a name for each of the twigs. The testimony of Chief Lontulo and the other witnesses was so damning that the Governor General, the man nominally responsible for the system, slit his throat. During the account of one atrocity, one of the judges broke down and wept. This is now a man explaining the atrocities that was taking place in his village. When them hearing these things, one of them cut him own throat. And next one, the judge himself broke down and wept. The commissioners returned to Europe and wrote their report. It was damning, but Leopold still had one trick up his sleeve. The day before the report was published, every major newspaper in England got a document purporting to be a complete and authentic resume of the report. It came from the West African Missionary Association. The newspapers were delighted. Not only did it give them a one-day jump on the big story of the week, but also it was in English. Associated Press set it on to the U.S. However, when the report itself came out, the papers realized that they had been tricked. The summary was nowhere near as damning as the report itself. They then discovered that the West African Missionary Association did not actually exist, and the summary had been delivered by a Belgian priest whose church had recently been given a large donation by Leopold. The full report detailed one atrocity after another: fatal beatings, random killings, senseless acts of cruelty. One woman who was making bricks had clay forced into her vagina by the overseer. Wow. Okay, continue reading. One woman who was making bricks had clay forced into her vagina by the overseer. All the Belgian agent said was, quote, "If you die working for me, they'll throw you in the river." There was page after page after page on the severing of hands. Nobody could doubt the authenticity of the evidence. There were numerous witnesses to each atrocity, and the witnesses had risked their lives giving testimony to the commission. One man reported that when he and a companion had been on their way to testify, they had been seized by a Belgian officer and hung from a tree for several days. Then they were beaten around the neck and private parts with a stick. His companion died and his body was thrown in the river. Britain and the US began to put pressure on the Belgian government, but they did not own the Congo. Leopold did. They attempted to buy it from him. You hear that? You hear that? You hear them thing there? You can take Belgium, and Belgium is like you take Jamaica and drop in America, in Rasta. You take Belgium and drop in a Congo. I mean, it lasts. But no, the US and Britain are trying to buy the country from Leopold. And Leopold owned the country. Imagine that. This little guy from Europe, where same little country is not even the size of, I mean, it's like Kingston to Jamaica. The Belgium is like the Belgium in the Congo. Leopold didn't want it, so they attempted to buy it from him. During their negotiations, they asked to see the balance sheets. When government auditors examined the books, they discovered that the 32 million francs the government had lent Leopold were missing. They suspected he had given the money to his teenage mistress. The money was written off along with 110 million francs worth of debt, much of it in the form of bonds given to Leopold's teenage mistress and the king's other lovers. Moreover, Leopold received another 100 million francs in compensation, but his atrocity stunned rule